now going to invite up our keynote session, and I'm super excited about this. Years ago, when TealBook was first launched, I had the pleasure of meeting Stephany Lapierre, and she said, one of these days, my company is going to be so successful, I'm going to be on center stage with you. So we used to call her a baby CEO back then. She had a baby company, she was a brand new CEO, but she was passionate. And I don't know if you know, but TealBook is going gangbusters. And it's really important subject. So I'm going to invite you and Jeff Wright from Nasdaq to the stage. So I'm going to ask them some questions, and then I'm going to have mic runners over there, and one will be over here with microphones. And so we will ask you guys to all entertain some questions as well. So let's start off with, who thinks data is important, by a show of hands? Good. If you didn't raise your hand, we should talk after this is over.
We'll challenge you.
Yes. All right. Who has excellent quality data on their suppliers? Okay. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's not good. Who would like to have better quality data? Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we like to know that everything we're analyzing is actually based on good supplier data? So Steph, obviously there's a reason you started your company. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning, and how did it start? Why did you start it? And why did you have a passion for it?
And Jeff and I had a long conversation about the history, and we don't have enough time. So I'm going to skip to sort of fast forward, 7 years ago, where I start seeing, so before that, 16 years ago, I started a consulting business, building procurement functions. Large companies who had invested in ERP, source to pay, different systems, had fairly mature procurement teams. And what I saw as the biggest blocker to actually driving value for the organization is lack of access to good data. There's data everywhere, but I saw a lot of disparity in the data for each systems. You need to clean the data from your financial systems. You need to upload it into a software and start seeing that every time you implement a software, you need the suppliers to come into a portal. And I just didn't see how that would scale. And as I started building procurement functions for smaller companies that were accelerating their go-to-market and needed everything, we were starting with, hey, we can do this in a different way. We could build a transparent, scalable, enabling procurement function when we all love this. But again, as soon as we start introducing software, we start running into the same problem. Mm-hmm. And so I really saw that this was not a people problem, because people really wanted to drive value for their organization. It's not a process problem, because we actually over-process most things in procurement. Mm-hmm. And it was not a software problem. Lots of software, great workflow, but without having a solid data foundation, those workflow were not optimized. And then having analytics on software with subpar data doesn't give you amazing insight. And so that was the mission for, it took me 9 years of killing the idea. And I started seeing cloud technology being mass adopted. I started seeing the potential of AI and ML, and then start putting the building blocks together. And here we are today.
Okay, so here we are today, but we still don't all have good data. So what is holding us back, and what can we do?
And I'm going to skip. Well, I think it's such an opportunity. In the last couple of years, what we've seen is the amount of, we already had a lot to do in procurement to be able to wrap our head around our supplier base, even just tier 1 alone, right? And so we saw with COVID, then Black Lives Matter, then suddenly ESG target, then risk is becoming more prevalent. There's new regulations that are asking you to see your tier 2, your tier 3. It's an endless amount of requirements that needs to be captured, and it makes the task incredibly challenging. So to me, it is an opportunity for procurement. I think it's procurement's responsibility to get better visibility into your supplier base, optimize the investment that you are making in those systems, the investment that you are making into people. And if you could unlock this pretty big asset, every supplier, if you think from discovery to sourcing, to diligence, to contract onboarding, to reporting, to analytics, like all the activities require good data. And if we don't have good data, think about just the loss and the cost of the organization. How we got here don't read this slide. This is ugly on purpose. This is not Nasdaq, by the way, architecture. So you'll see a much more sophisticated journey.
We started there.
But everyone starts here. This means you have multiple systems, either through acquisition, people in functional team, they really want to test and POC these new tools, and there's a lot of new exciting technology and software available. And what ends up happening is that suddenly you end up having a little bit of data everywhere. You need suppliers to come to multiple portals. Of course, and if you don't know this yet, they won't come, just so you know. And so you're going to have to supplement how you're getting better data in your software. And if each functional team is using a software to accomplish their own requirements, how is that benefiting the organization? And so kind of thinking, why we got here is that, yes, we didn't have the option of technology. We didn't have cloud technology. We didn't have automation the way we have. We didn't have AI, ML to be able to tackle this problem in a different way. But we did implement software with the notion if we have workflow and we have a portal, suppliers are going to come and we're able to curate this problem. But it just didn't quite work out that way.
So what are you doing now to fix that problem?
Well, and I just put a couple of slides to give, more sort of visual, but I think this problem is just getting amplified. There's so many new exciting startups, and our view is that you should have the flexibility to buy the software that you want based on what you need to achieve, and there's a lot of options, but you shouldn't depend on those software for the data. If you can start with a data foundation, and then you think workflow, you think processes, you think software, then you're going to get more optimization in the investment you're making in those systems. It's going to be more interchangeable. You're going to build a more agile, flexible technology stack that, if the new sourcing tool that has better technology or the new contract system that's smarter comes along, you're not stuck because the data and the integration is so costly that you can sort of move a lot faster. And we're really proud that Kearney named TealBook the first supplier data foundation. There's a few more logos in that middle bucket, but all of them require still suppliers to come to a portal. So if you're thinking, how can I automate the collection, the enrichment, and the distribution of data across all these systems, that's really what we've been building. And then just maybe on a final note, I think what's most exciting, 4 years ago, I was at a conference, Eloise Epstein. Who knows Eloise Epstein from Kearney? Mm-hmm. Okay, you may want to look her up because she's pretty awesome. But she predicted, where the market was going to go 4 years ago. And I remember sitting in the front row. She's talking about, today, 4 years ago, each software has a data stack. It's disparate, it's siloed, it doesn't connect, it doesn't get enriched. In 2 to 3 years, we're going to move to data lake, and this is what Jeff will talk about. So how do you build the data warehouse, the data lake internally, so that you can connect your system, you can connect data. But if you're connecting data from different systems, not having the best data, it's going to be very challenging and costly. And then you're still going to require, data for sustainability, diversity, forced labor, cybersecurity, and the list can go on. And suddenly you're now in the business of building data infrastructure and bringing third-party data to what she predicted the future to be a platform that's AI-based, that's enriching data across all the system, no matter the UI, no matter the application. Your data should be distributed consistently across your system, giving you, again, more flexibility, more visibility. And that's what we've been focused on. And so to date, we've been selling our data into an application. We focused on use case where we felt we could win. So we can report supplier diversity with 20 to 300% more diverse spend because we don't depend on suppliers to come to a portal to put their certificate. And so that's a super easy win for our customers. There's other use cases in our application that got us to where we are. Grew quite significantly, raised $72 million in the past 2.5 years. Won amazing customers that are partnering with us, how we're growing our journey. And then we did a full rebuild of our platform so that our data has more transparency, data lineage can be audited, also build in business rules for customers to choose the data that they need and then be able to integrate that data into whatever system, data lake, analytics tools, reporting tool, in a way that continuously enrich and continuously gives you better visibility. It's not perfect, but it's a journey to getting, less error, less need to validate data, and improve the quality and the insight that you're going to get over time.
So the insights that people can get now on their suppliers is amazing, and it can hedge risk so much faster and easier by having knowledge. So we talk to people that have no idea who's in their tail, have no idea what suppliers sit there, because these aren't big, sexy contracts. Nobody wants to go in and analyze them. You know, $10,000 agreement here, $100,000 there. They have no idea what kind of risk they're exposing. Or do they have some diversity spend? Or do they have anything else in there? Or people that, you know, companies that are on watch lists. You know, it's just crazy that we can function without knowing things, you know?
And even in supplier diversity alone, because it's a use case we know incredibly well, is that you know, you'll see customers who have hundreds of suppliers who've never come to the portal, and suddenly they're being reported, and that can represent, you know, a significant increase in your diversity goals, even 100% more diverse spend in the first year alone. Now we've built more that you can increase the impact with automating tier 2 and things like that, but it's a really powerful way to say, hey, we did this through a portal base before. It was incredibly manual. We had to validate the data. We had to match the entity. We had to package it to report 4 times a year. Took us 6 to 8 weeks, and now you have it in your dashboard, automated with significantly more diverse spend, and, right? So it was a good way for a customer to test, hey, if I had a data-led approach to solving my data problem versus a portal-based approach, this could be significantly, you know, transformative for our organization.
Yeah, so our WeBank certificate expires in October. So we have gotten probably 75, 100 emails recently saying you need to upload your new certificate, which means 100 different portals, email boxes. A lot of them are just email, send us a copy, that we have to upload.
And this is one requirement.
One little requirement.
Risk, sustainability,
yeah,
payment, all of the data that you need to update across portal. It's, yeah, portal fatigue is a real problem, and
yeah,
we're here to fix
so
that.
yeah, we have a lot of data, but we don't have it organized in a way that we can use it. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Nasdaq. And can you tell us a little bit, who here has heard of Nasdaq? Okay, once again, if you didn't raise your hand, we have some children that need some education. Can tell us about your job, what do you manage, tell us about the company, just a brief, who are you as a CPO?
Yeah, so Jeff Wright, been there for about 7 or 8 years, procurement in every traditional sense that you can think of. So we have, Jaime might not like this, we have a category strategy, we have a strategic sourcing team, we have supplier risk. I mean, our categories are inclusive of some obvious ones like travel, contingent labor, market data, telecom. Our risk and ESG programs are fairly, the risk program is fairly mature. The ESG and diversity and DEI program is developing quickly. We have a whole data analytics section, which is like the heart of our team. So we have that along with CLM, our P2P system. So it's all kind of within our remit.
You know, if any company in the world should have good data, it should be Nasdaq.
You would think, you know, you go back like 3 slides. You don't have to go back, but 3 slides back, there was a slide that said disparate or poor data. We actually started with no data, and that's like where our strategy started, across the board in every area, whether it was strategic sourcing or risk or anywhere in between. My predecessor, he's here, I think he's over there somewhere. He actually started the journey for us. He hired me, so hopefully I represent him okay over here. And that's where we started, was data, because we had none before. You know, I say it's actually the foundation of the house is what I say here. It's actually more like the general contractor, the more you think about it. A little more complex if you've ever worked with one professionally or in business. They're hit or miss, and if you get a miss on your general contractor, your house could fall down or you got ripped off. It's the same with the procurement organization, at least in my lens, in my view. If you don't, you could have a procurement team without data or with poor disparate data, but you're likely not going to be empowered or have a seat at the table, as some others have spoken about throughout the day today. So I think it's important that you really root yourself in that data so that you can develop a strategy from it in all arenas.
So you've done some major transformations at different companies, and is this digital transformation taking it to a level that you've never gone before?
Yeah, there's a mic here. So when we started, you can call it a quote-unquote perfect storm. We had a really terrible custom old ERP, and we also had no P2P. So when we started, we harnessed those things to our benefit, because I actually think the creation of data and how you're bringing it to your organization is just as important. In fact, it's more important than the analytics. It's actually the first step, is creating it properly.
So what did you do, and why? I mean, so you had to start off on the journey. You had to look for data.
Yeah, so I say it now, looking back, we're not at all perfect in any capacity. We actually made a ton of errors to figure it out. Through the implementation of an ERP, through a P2P, I don't know where he is, but I have the old socks on. I got some new ones. It allowed us, we didn't know this at the time, but we were fixing what was no data or very invisible data to something that became transparent. The best example and the most simplistic with Coupa is, we had no governance over how we would pay our suppliers, and we have over 3,500 of them. But we moved to a PO-backed payment process for the vast majority. I would say we're probably at a higher percentage than almost every company in that regard. And what that does is just give us transparency. It gives us visibility. So the data is created in a way that we can actually turn around and figure out how we can get intelligence from it, which we didn't have previously. So that's probably the hardest thing to do, because you have to sell that. You have to spend a ton of money on it. But those systems, I think, are the most critical to figuring out how you can actually get some real data that you can control sustainably.
Yeah, I remember back in my consulting days that we would ask how much spend you have with this supplier, and they said, oh no, let me call them.
Well, Steph and I were talking about this too. What really led us down a path of creating a corporate data analytics program, our CEO asked how much spend we had with Morgan Stanley, and there's 35 different supplier IDs for Morgan Stanley. So we have the data, and we have the spend data. It's in our ERP, it's in our P2P, but we didn't have a way to really cleanse it in a good way that could create some intelligence, which leads us to the next step, which I think we'll get to here.
So what was your first step? First step is just admitting you have a problem? No, that just sounds, this is not AA, sorry.
Yeah, acknowledgement's very key to that. Yeah, you should look in the mirror and see if you have the right data. It's easy for me to sit up here and say it. It's way harder to sell a bureaucratic organization, which we all work for, whether you believe it or not. And it's hard to get that, right? You need to make sure that you have the right systems in place that can create the real data. So that's the first step.
And then what's the next step?
Well, for us, and I think everybody has a different journey, and ours isn't close to over. So our second step was figuring out how to get intelligence, and this is where we created our own suite of tech products, and we built what we consider to be a bit of a data lake. So we have like a single source of truth. So data from our ERP let me step back. The way we sold this, because this creates investment too, this is a requirement that you have to sell to your leadership team. For us, the way that we could have it resonate, and this is more of a sidebar, but we did it by saying we're not just going to focus on suppliers. We're going to focus agnostically across all third parties. So then we can have a balance of trade. We can look at our customers, which was really what resonated with the business leaders. And then obviously, I'm selfishly interested in the vendor and spend data, so it worked. But we do now have a bit of a workload on our corporate data analytics team because we're looking at all third parties across the board. And as we do that, we're feeding in more sources as the weeks pass. And so within this data lake, we cleanse the data. If anybody has any questions on the tools we use, I'm happy to talk about that offline, or here, if you guys want to know. But we bring it all into the data lake, and that was really our second step.
And can you do me a favor, for some of the folks that might be younger in their career, explain a data lake?
Well, the easiest way to describe it, because I'm not a technologist or a programmer either. We hired people for that. But the way that I would explain it is, you have your disparate systems, which Steph touched on a few slides back. That's a systemic problem. Everybody in this room, I think, would probably agree with that. If you can find a way to bring that data into a singular place, and in the case of what we're talking about here with suppliers, you put it in a warehouse, right? And you invest in, ours is cloud infrastructure. We have all of our data coming into that. We have ETL tools to make sure that we're...
ETL?
Extract, transform, and load.
Okay.
You wanted to know what that means. It's a way to kind of set up your data with the right structure and methodology so that you can actually parse it apart with mapping tables, with databases. And with the ETL tools, we then pair that with some APA. RPA might be another way to think about that for QA and testing. And then on top of that, you have to have a way to actually present this in an articulate way. So then we obviously have things like ClickView, Power BI, and some interfaces to use for that data.
Good. So
it's fairly complex. So.
Yes, and you have a lot of acronyms in there. When did you start on this journey?
This was, I would say, close to 5 years ago. So you really start getting value as the years pass because you start seeing volume year over year. It's been about 5 years, and it's a long, hard-fought journey. So we're still working on it. So
where do you think you're in the journey, if I could ask?
I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we have a seat at the table now, so there's validation behind it, right?
Yeah.
That's where if I step back, if you don't have data, you're going to perhaps fall into the stereotype of what some procurement teams fall into. But with the right data, leadership sees that, our CEO sees it, our board sees it, they see it in our financial reporting. We never miss our bottom line estimates, and I think there's a lot of value to that, and it all comes through the validation of that data. So as it relates to our journey. Our next step, and it creates partnerships with companies like Steph's, is to figure out what's next, right? So we have all our data in a place, but it's still fairly manually intensive. We still have a lot of cleansing that happens within the data warehouse, and that equates to people we had to hire, and more technology that sometimes we have to purchase. But as the space evolves and as TealBook and the companies like TealBook evolve, I think we can grow with them, not only to help automate what we do currently in-house, but then they have all sorts of other cool data that we can pair onto our supplier IDs, and so we can not just look at spend reporting analytics, but we could also pair that with their risk profiles, or with whether or not they're diverse, or if they have any sustainability metrics included. And so that's kind of what the future holds, is really kind of the icing on the cake.
So would it be possible then to also use them for fourth-party data?
We're looking into that. I absolutely think we can. It's a matter of ingesting that data and what companies are ready to do that in a way that it's actually valuable. I'd be interested to learn from anyone in this room if they're doing something with fourth parties, because we're investigating it as we speak.
I mean, we're going to be responsible at some point for fourth and fifth parties, and we don't have any idea. First off, most people don't even know first tier, let alone further down, second and third tiers, how much risk they're introducing into their supply chain, because they don't know who they buy from. And how do you get around all that? Because a lot of suppliers don't want to tell you who their suppliers are, because it's like their secret sauce. They don't want other people to know. So are you working with folks to try and unmask all that?
Yeah, and unfortunately half of the slide is missing here, but at the bottom of our architecture, so this is how Nasdaq is looking to feed data into their data lake, and then how the data gets exposed for Nasdaq's purposes. And I don't know if you
I'll talk to this quick. So there's like the short-term vision that we have with TealBook, and I'm pretty sure we're 100% aligned on this, is supplier diversity. Everybody uses TealBook for supplier diversity. A lot of companies do, and we intend to do that as well. We have diversity reporting today. It's in our data lake. The cleansing and the process that it takes to create that reporting is not overnight. It takes weeks to get that in a place that we're ready to present it. So we want to shift that to TealBook. And the other is our vendor spend analytics. So this is it feeds our category approach. It feeds our strategic sourcing in really valuable ways. It gives us the balance of trade that we will send to our businesses. And so those are the things that we're going to work with you guys in the short term on. I think the longer term vision is to take our data lake and have a two-way API. So we're going to get some of the cool data that you guys have. We're going to send you ours and really be the face of our data lake. So we'll still have it. And I encourage companies to invest in something like that because its return is exponential in the form of savings. But we want you to be the face of that, and then we can utilize a company like TealBook to do it in real time in a more fluid way, operationalized, less manual.
Now, I know we're non-commercial, but there's a reason you chose TealBook, and I'm sure you've looked at other suppliers. What was the reason? What pushed you over that line and said this is the right partner?
Yeah. I'm not here to pitch TealBook in any capacity, but it's an easy sell. They're grabbing data from everywhere that they possibly can in compliant and ethical ways. And it's something that I haven't found a lot of companies to do at volume as they have. I also think their profile caters to our purchasing profile. So there's a lot of direct sourcing in this room. There's a lot of manufacturing, a lot of, I'm sure, education, pharmaceuticals. We're all tech, right? You can't touch and feel anything that Nasdaq produces. It's all tech, outside of real estate, outside of people. And it hasn't failed us yet. If I go to their platform and I look up a technology vendor, I'm going to find them and their peers.
And you'll also find our diversity certificate, so we're in TealBook as well. So if anyone uses TealBook, you don't have to keep asking us for it.
I think the other benefit is we can grow with them. They're coming in a hyper growth stage, and they're giving us a seat at the table. Hopefully that continues to develop strategy together, right? So you can learn from us and my peers, and we can learn from you. And I think that platform really has a lot of potential.
Great.
And we have, we're so and I'll answer the question about tiering after, but I think we're so fortunate to have customers who bought in the vision, getting the time to value through our application initially to build the use case. It creates energy too when you see a win on something as simple as supplier diversity. Then you can kind of see the possibility of, hey, actually, even on basic firmographic, I need fields across my systems that if I don't have those fields, I can't quite optimize the information. And the direction that we're going with the platform, what Jeff has built is really impressive, and it's quite sophisticated, and he's got the talent. I would say that this is the minority of our customers. We've partnered now with our most strategic clients who are completely different in terms of the sector, the maturity level, the technology stack, the priorities, like where they feel the data pain. And the problem is the same for them, is the data the data quality, the data enrichment ongoingly, and the distribution is what's causing the pain. And so, again, we've been super fortunate. Clients have pushed us in the direction. They're validating the requirements, that's quite flexible across sectors and maturity level. And the customers who have not built all the infrastructure of a Nasdaq, I mean, it's easier for us to integrate into what he's built because it's much simpler and he gets the benefit faster. But our clients who have not built this, you don't actually necessarily need to fully build that type of infrastructure. And so that's really the vision is, we are normalizing the data. We have ways to bring unique identifier across your systems to be able to enrich and redistribute in a way that you can, again, push to different systems.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I guess, is pretty obvious and should be talked about too, but we need ways to discover suppliers, need ways to find competitors. And that can be hard to do in some niche areas of enterprise technology. And you guys do a pretty good job of that. I think in many cases, you don't have that data either because it's just so hard to find certain sectors of tech. But your platform allows for that, right? So that's almost like an immediate benefit when you contract with them, is that you have an ability to discover suppliers.
So it's not just data on your suppliers that you have access to. You have data. You have access to all suppliers that are in TealBook?
Yeah. You probably should start there. That's really the starting point that really got our dialogue going. I think at the time it was with Matt. But it's the discovery process. So it's not just your own suppliers, but their competitors, their peers, or maybe you want to introduce more diverse suppliers into certain arenas that it would make sense, and they have pretty easy search capabilities.
So you can go by capability, and then you can go by diversity or certain ESG scores.
So again, this is the application. So our customers moving forward have the option to just push the data into something else and leverage the application. And we do have a pretty sophisticated search engine. And most of our customers, they want to lift the suppliers they already do business with, because often you just don't know what they do. You don't know what they do beyond what you're buying from them. So that benefit up front and then making that information actionable, it's like you're taking your master data and you're actually now leveraging it in a way that's more consumable and actionable by people in the organization. And then, the contingent, finding contingent suppliers. I mean, in the last couple of years, that's part of our growth, is that we had so many disruptions. So many of our customers were looking for different suppliers, either moving their supply chain from Asia to North America, or finding suppliers that just could sell PPEs that met requirements, or ingredients to make PPEs, or whatever it was. And so our search engine is leveraged. It gets smarter as the data gets better. It gets smarter as it understands your master data. So it's built in a way that just continues to add benefits, and our customers in the application can make more personal, and they can segment it different ways. So I'd say that from an application perspective, our customer wants to continue to leverage those capabilities, and it is really powerful. Now, the digital profile that we've created is 5.5 million businesses globally today, and that's continuously growing. The investment moving forward, and you can't see here, is on the what you see on the left-hand side is the amount of ingestions that we can have now across millions of data sources. It's obviously a fairly complex process that we've been building for 7 years, but in the new platform, that ingestion is massively scalable. And what we hope is our customers can self-serve, because they know where there's requirements and there's data sources, especially as our clients are expanding this globally. Each country has its own regulations and its own requirements, and there's sources of data that they may want to put through a pipeline. That's a great way to actually be able to consume that into a unified supplier profile, and then into their system or in their reporting or their analytics. So that's sort of where we're heading.
So you have suppliers that are worldwide, or is it primarily North America? Do you concentrate in certain countries? If I come to you and say we're moving into, let's say, Portugal, a new country we're going to do business, can you find me Portugal?
Yeah, again, and I'm dissociating the application, because for supplier discovery, well, on the master data, we will match close to 100% of your suppliers. And so there's an automated match through our AI, and then we'll have a certain amount of humans in the loop to make sure that we are matching to the right entity. Once your TealBook is set up, then it will ongoingly improve over time. And so our customers are all global. Like, we work with Fortune 1000 companies, highly regulated environment. And so once we match, then our machine learning starts looking what other suppliers in the world are most similar. And that's how we've been able to expand the footprint globally. So, heavy, obviously, customer base in North America, but because they operate globally, we have a fairly big footprint. I'd say it's probably, I think it's a third, maybe, or half is North American suppliers, others is global. But we have customers who partnered with us who said, we need to start reporting small, diverse spend or sustainable spend in India, right? Where do you start looking for data? So if you do this automatic, like manually, it's going to be a really tough time, but we're able to point our machines to start looking for data sets in India, to start matching it to indicators, to start populating. So you're not going to get perfect data across all the attributes, what we have data packs now, but what you're going to be able to see in the new version is transparency, trust score on every single attribute, and the opportunity to decide what you do with the data. Good data, you want to automate into your ERP, your source to pay. Data that's not good enough, maybe you just don't want it at all. Most of our CPO customers are saying, actually, we want to see it because it may be good for analytics, we may want to validate it, but the goal is giving the mechanism for our customers to be able to do something with it. If it's validated, then it gets pushed through automatically into their system. So quite sophisticated. To answer your question on the tiering, I know it came along around, but on the data pipeline, we're continuously looking at ways so that we can start further mapping what is a tier 2, what is a tier 3, what are the probability of being that. So the vision sort of 23andMe, I've got a cousin, a third cousin that pops up once in a while, so how can we make that, over time more robust, more trusted? And then we use tier 2 as a very strategic way. And so if you think tier 2, the supplier diversity, okay, but when you think about the opportunity to automate your tier 1 suppliers to report their own spend by loading their master data into TealBook, we have customers now that have 72%. And that was Freddie Mac on stage talking a few weeks ago, so I can say it. William Bagley was saying that 72% of their tier 1 suppliers are reporting their own diverse spend because we're automating the process. So it makes it so much easier for the tier 1 suppliers to be able to report. We do have aggregated anonymized rights to data, so we don't expose it, we don't share it. We're fully compliant there, but it does give indicators of trust. It does give indicators of risk. We can start mapping out and triangulate which suppliers are actually tier 2, tier 3. So it's super strategic when you use it that way. It's not just for your tier 2, which will make a massive impact. It's beyond that. How can you start really tapping into risk or even innovation? Who are the suppliers that are getting spend across multiple customers in your sector? We won't tell you the clients, but we can show you an indicator that there's a small company that's starting to get more spend across the entire network, so that we can start raising that as potential innovation or someone that you should be considering, right? So the intelligence built over time, and for us, the investment is how much data sources across as many attributes over time to meet our customers' requirements across more suppliers, across more geographies, so our clients have the flexibility to expand the number of use cases, and then lifting the type of insight that our clients can leverage to drive better decision, either through their own analytics or through our application.
Yeah, and if I can tag on to that. So like my 2 cents on tier 3 and beyond, a lot of that's going to be driven through regulation and requirements that come, and I think just general acceptance within the industry, like diversity, DEI, and ESG are the exact same example of that over the past 3 years. We just had, as an example, that we just had a Big 4 firm come in and audit our supplier risk function. The only 2 areas of opportunity were tier 3, tier 4 monitoring and governance. So when we asked them, like, what other companies do, can you give us some guidance? They had none. So I do think that we're still in the beginning stages of what it means to actually monitor tier 3 and beyond.
Right.
In a sustainable way, right? Like you can go beat down the door of Amazon and ask them what they have. That's probably a bad example because they're not going to answer the phone. But other companies may actually give you that information. But I wouldn't if I were Amazon either. They have 1 million customers. It'd be impossible to do. But I think that this will come. I think we're in the beginning stages. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think we are in the beginning stages, but it's so exciting that, because you're right, there's no way we're ever going to get it manually. And nobody wants to do that kind of work, just tracking it down and tracking it down. But so are you working with both private and publicly held companies to get their data, right?
We're actually, it's kind of interesting, as we were re-platforming and looking at our data set, we've been so focused on small businesses because those are the really hard ones to contact. They don't have the resources to update 500 different portals. Even suppliers that don't have websites. So we look at Subsite, we look through social media, where can we find B2B suppliers, and that's how we've been growing. And so we were, we were compared to like Capital IQ and other platform where we did comparison. And we're actually, we scored better on many attributes for small businesses, which is pretty amazing because our team now, we've hired 65 new engineers in the past year, but that was even before. And so the team that we've had even the beginning, we're doing really well. And so, yeah, I think.
That's awesome. So I would like to open it up to the audience for questions. So I have Nick over here as a mic runner, and Mitch over here as a mic runner. So if anyone would like the microphone, they will run it to you. And this is your opportunity to ask some questions. Right here? Who's going to get there first? Oh, okay. Oh, first over here in the center, and then over here to Chuck.
Oh, hi, I'm Rudy. I'm with the Gates Foundation, and asking more from a maturity, I appreciate the, in terms of the assessment and the strategy of the data lake and data sourcing. For a new built department, and we have various disparate sources of data, as you pointed out, what would be the approach to, is it outsourcing that to a expert in-source? How do you, can you advise on, do you partner with IT? That sort of a journey, if you can discuss internally, externally, that give me some data points to.
Yeah, I can tell you our journey. I think this might have been behind me too. Someone mentioned earlier, you want to have the right technology in place, and then make sure that your processes can cater to that technology. Not the other way around, where you have a bunch of custom processes. That's where we started. We started with a highly customized old ERP, no P2P. So the concept of even having good visibility into our data, it didn't exist. So I would look at where you're at in that stage of it. That's where we started. We initially partnered with, you need to partner with your technology organization. I think it's really important. They may just be consuming the cost, but I would think that they'd support that, especially from an infrastructure and storage perspective. So bring them in, and I think this benefits from a top-down approach. You want to sell this business case with an ROI behind it, or otherwise you're a dead man walking from the beginning. You really need to get your leadership team involved, and so that they understand truly what is the benefit of investing in good, comprehensive data. But I would look at those two areas first, and then talk to some of the folks here about some of the technology that you can subscribe to. That it's a long journey too. This doesn't happen overnight. Outsourcing exists. I've never done that in this space in data. I think if you have control over it yourself, you can move in a more dynamic way. You can kind of become fluid as things change. As our CEO has a new important thing that she wants us to start monitoring, we can control that much more quickly if we own it versus outsourcing it.
And what I would say, I was speaking at another conference with another customer, and he was talking about doing digital transformation with software first, and so implemented Oracle, many different sites, then thought about data, and it created a lot of friction. And same with another ERP, with an S2P, and then a lot of the failures and costs associated with not having good data up front. And so that's my super biased opinion. I think if you're starting more kind of immature, enriching your master data to see where you have duplicates, to be able to clean it, to have your own taxonomy, then you're in a much better position, one, strategically, to see what are the low-hanging fruits opportunity, even from a savings perspective, to how you're going to build your strategy over time, where you have the biggest pain or the biggest need for data, so then you can have the biggest impact based on your corporate priorities, and then start thinking about workflow and systems to use the data to be able to enrich.
Yeah, you're actually right. We did that. So with Global Tech, let's throw another acronym at you, MDM, our Master Data Management Process, which is exactly what you just spoke to. We partnered with tech for that. And that's almost has to be your starting point, is your MDM strategy.
Yeah. And that's sort of where our customers are less mature. We're sort of painting the North Stars, like you've made, and different times too, right? Different costs and different approach. Like there's our customers have tried a solution in many different ways, but that's really what we're looking to design. How do we design the North Star? You may still want to have a data lake and build that, but then at least you have a good place to start to lift the information and start seeing opportunities.
And what's important to your firm too, right? So is it an approach to understand where you're spending in certain categories? Is it more of a risk management approach? I think that's also really important.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and it's right over here.
Hi, Chuck Hatzis from the CME Group. So I guess I have two questions. One is, did you get other functions to help you with the business case to make that investment to get TealBook on? And then the second question is, what are some examples of things that you're doing now that you've got all of this great data that you didn't do maybe a year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, so to your first question, we had a seat at the table before we brought TealBook in, so I made that decision on my own. But that was because we had a seat at the table, and we did that through we had to have a business case to bring in and have something resonate with the leaders of all of our different business segments. We did that I put myself in their shoes, a little bit of empathy to determine what they want. They want information on their customers. And they also want to have an understanding of how we spend with those customers. We have a big overlap with where we spend and where we buy, and whereas our customers buy from us. And so that's what got us a seat at the table. In terms of the value that we're seeing, well, we just started the relationship with TealBook, so we've been under contract for like 2 months. But we're seeing value already just in the form of discovery. Our API isn't yet live. We're still working through that integration, but the discovery process alone is pretty incredible. I haven't yet found a source that competes with it. But otherwise, our data lake and all the value and the reporting we get from it benefits our strategic sourcing team the most. It actually helps us identify opportunities where there's some anomalies with our spend. I think you said you're a CME. We look at our market. We spend a lot of market data. I think you guys do too. Yeah, and it helps us understand where we have perhaps different business lines subscribing to the same CME data. And so then we go and we look where we can you know what I mean. So the data does really help kind of identify some saving strategies across the board, whether it's tech, telecom, or anywhere else. So that's by far the biggest benefit to our data lake.
Good. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for being, and this was so engaging. I really loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.